views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey there, nice to see you once again. It's time for the Bronx Buzz. This is BronxNet's program where we talk to people who write stuff or who edit stuff, who are reporters, journalists, editors, writers, people who cover our elected officials, for example. And also we talk to filmmakers and photographers and people who are artists and people who are putting stuff out in the Bronx. In our second segment, we're going to talk to a group that did a really interesting film that is done by students, as a matter of fact. But to get started, we're going to have our serious face on, and we're going to talk to our buddy Rebecca C. Lewis, who is over there in Albany as we speak. And she's at the state capitol, and she's got some stuff to talk with us about. Nice to see you again, Rebecca.
Nice to see you too. It's pretty cold up here, just sheets of ice on the sidewalk. It is if you're coming up to Albany, just be careful. It's very cold, very icy.
I was going to say, welcome to Albany. That's what you get. Nonetheless, you wrote a piece that caught our eye, and obviously a little while back, Governor Hochul did her State of the State address, and very interestingly, and with your great analysis as always, you wrote a piece on what she left out of her State of the State address. I thought it was really interesting because most people, most electeds were generally enthusiastic about it. But at the bottom of their press releases, they said, by the way, I might have liked this. So why don't you talk to me about a couple of the things and we'll break them down that the governor left out of her State of the State address.
There were a number of things that she did not include. More funding for the Excluded Workers Fund, which has been depleted. That provides aid to undocumented immigrants and other people. State unemployment. Nothing about raising taxes, which is always a big deal for progressive lawmakers. Nothing on good cause eviction, which advocates are hoping to get passed. Very soon, as soon as possible. Nothing with single payer health care. It's Dick Gottfried's last session, and there's a strong push to get that through. So there are a number of things that she didn't include in her State of the State.
So stepping back to the whole package, do you then say the analysis is she took a safe road? She talked about the things that were obvious. There were things that were that everybody would like, but when it comes to getting in the weeds, she didn't want to put that out in her first State of the State address.
Certainly,
especially with an election coming up, by the way.
Yes, I mean, certainly, I wouldn't say it was 100% safe. There was certainly plenty there for progressives and the left and Democrats to be happy about. New housing plans, although not everyone was happy about it. Commitment to reform 421A. There was a lot, but at the same time, it was relatively safe. Notably, she did not talk about 421A in her actual speech. She didn't mention her support for the Clean Slate Act in her actual speech. She expressed support for parole reform or other sort of criminal justice actions that could get a side eye.
It would have been nice to see what her reaction is to the pushback on the criminal justice reform we had, on the bail reform, which has raised ire in a lot of places. Would have been nice to hear her say, for example, I'm all for what was done, and that's how we're going forward, or I'm open-minded about reforming it. Let's talk about that Clean Slate Act, which you referred to in your article. And I'll just quote right from your article. It would seal the felony records of many formerly incarcerated people after a certain amount of time on after their release. So if you have a felony record, and some of it could be significant crimes, then all of a sudden that would go away after a period of time. She didn't comment on that. That would
She
be
it,
incredibly controversial.
it was in her State of the State, but if you didn't closely read her book or didn't look through the details, you could have glossed over it. And certainly, it is somewhat controversial. It almost passed last session, but it kind of just the negotiations fell through right at the 10-yard line, if I'm using that football metaphor correctly. But certainly she has kind of avoided taking hard positions so far, before the session on any particular bill. So it's pretty significant to see that she actually said that she would work to get the Clean Slate Act passed, when has in the past very much just said, I'm going to leave it up to the legislature. Let me talk to the legislature. Let me see what they have to say when asked about specific bills and her potential position on them.
I can't tell you, and I've been doing programs on BronxNet for a very long time. I can't tell you how many discussions we've had on 421A. And, so why don't you talk about, the tax break for developers and why maybe at this time it's time to relook at it. She didn't mention it, so let's you and I talk about it.
Yeah, that was another thing that was it was in her book, but it wasn't included in her
That's right.
actual speech. Her speech was, pretty short, but what she included was very much, I think, and others seem to think as well, what she chose to highlight was really what she wanted to highlight, like her big priorities, and certainly not the 421A, I'm sure is not a big priority, but it's certainly a very controversial topic. It provides a tax break for developers to include a certain number of affordable units in their otherwise market rate developments. It's up for renewal this year, so many lawmakers are saying just let it lapse. We can do something better, something new. Governor Hochul is proposing let 421A end and we'll replace it with something new, something better, something that uses taxpayer dollars better. But,
It would have
as
been nice to hear it. That's really
yes.
what your point is.
And
Alice, you quoted a number of elected officials and what their impressions were, and it was what I said earlier, where they said glowing things, but then they said, and by the way, I pulled out one that I saw a release from Alessandra Biaggi, Senator Biaggi, and she was grateful. She says that, and I'm going to read directly from her statement, that Governor Hochul prioritized ethics reform in her address, to entirely create a new ethics commission. But she said, I am disappointed by the absence of intent to reform the Legislative Ethics Commission or Office of the Inspector General. So, what she's getting at certainly is what happened with the governor, and that maybe we need more teeth above, to deal with this kind of malfeasance. So that was, yeah, I'm kind of adding to your article. That was another thing that was out there, or that is out there, that was not taken care of.
yeah, I mean, similar kind of vein. She got some criticism from the sexual harassment working group for not
That's right.
including anything specific about, new sexual harassment protections or workplace protections against harassment or discrimination. That's there's been a lot of progress, but there is still, bills pending, issues that need to be addressed, and she didn't mention any of that in her State of the State, which also garnered some disappointment from some on the left.
On the federal level, there with Build Back Better, there's a lot of talk about universal pre-K and those kinds of things. This did not come up, and it would have been, from an advocate's point of view, it would have been nice to hear the governor say, even if she doesn't fully endorse it, but say, this is on my plate right now, and we need a rigorous debate on how we're going to make sure that the youngest among us get a chance to, get into early childhood education.
Yeah, that was something somewhat notable as a potential fight between this at least the Senate and the governor as session begins. And during the budget, when the Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins was laying out her priorities and her conference's priorities for the year in her first speech of the session, she specifically mentioned universal pre-K statewide. And Hochul kind of very explicitly says in her book, not in her actual speech, that she feels that something that should be done at the federal level. It seems like she's supportive, but something at the federal level, not at the state level. So if the legislature is trying to get funding for this massive project, who knows if she'll be a willing partner in that.
I don't know if you and I are being a little too tough on her, because this is what a lot of elected officials do. And of course, at city and state, you folks are right on top of everything. And it's what you do is to find out, what's not there and what we still need and, kind of get in the weeds. What's your assessment now of looking ahead at the election? She's going to be a pretty strong favorite, is my assessment, despite the interest of some to run against her. I don't think she was going to go anywhere in the state of the state that was going to hamper that possibility.
Yeah, certainly she is a strong contender. The big test is really going to be the budget, of course, where all of these big ideas of hers are going to have to, ink to paper, budget lines, numbers. But, her biggest competition right now has got to be Representative Lee Zeldin. He's the presumptive GOP nominee. He has support from the county leaders across the state. He's, I guess as well known as a local member of Congress can be, and he is certainly getting his name out there. And Tom Suozzi as well, but I think he's not going anywhere soon. But I think the haven't seen polling specifically with Suozzi yet, but I think that Hochul is probably seen as the favorite in the Democratic primary.
I think there's no question about it. And the way that the state legislature is structured and the amount of support she's likely to get, I think we're going to get a few more years of Governor Hochul. One thing she did include, and we only have a few seconds to deal with it, and I'm sorry, is the whole notion of term limits for statewide officials. That is a fascinating concept. Born out of the last couple of governors who have had to be thrown out of office. So we can't really go through that anymore. Anyway, Rebecca C. Lewis, you're the best. We appreciate your time. Say hello to Jeff and Zach and all our buddies up there in Albany. And guaranteed, we're going to invite you back because there's a lot going on and we want to talk about it.
Well, thanks for having me on. I always love talking to you.
Great. So there you go, folks. We're going to take and all that noise is going on in the state capitol. As a matter of fact, it's not me. It's them. But anyway, we're going to take a short break, and then we're going to do that school group that made a film, and you'll see a piece of the film and everything else. Don't go away.